Are you guys watching me? You guys are watching me right now, aren't you? Wait. How is that even possible? Man, hackers have gotten really good. No, really, why are you watching me? I haven't made a video in months. Well, I wanted to make a video. I wanted to make a dream match response, but God, it's way too late for that. Then again, you guys are anxious enough to hack into my computer. Bizarre. Ah, fuck it. Better late than ever. Dream matches. Go. Hitting you up. How are you gonna do that? Sup guys, DCK here. Pardon the noise issues. I'm in a very quiet house on a very loud street. Let's just say that. So this is going to be just sort of 10 dream matches that I came up with personally, that I personally would see and enjoy, and yeah, all that good stuff. It's cool that that idea caught on from Sanders Robin, who I will probably post this to. I know Mickey Babylon had a really great response. I know a couple other people, I can't remember for the life of me who. I think Sean Carlton Zero did one. Okay, whatever. A lot of people did it. Sketchy. I'm going to throw my thoughts out there as well. I know it's a little outdated, but just anything to get this going. Plus, I haven't been on this channel in a while. College is over. Work has started. Life's wild. Alright, let's get going. Idea number 1. War of the Wire returns. This is an ROH one, and this one already happened, technically. The matchup, that is. I think even worse, or not worse, but more painstaking for fans, is not their dream matches, but the matches they're hoping to see, given what they're seeing. When you're led to start believing that something will eventually happen between two given individuals or groups or what have you, and it doesn't happen, it kind of kills your buzz. And that's what happened with me with the Briscoes versus the Age of the Fall in 2008 ROH. They had that big angle at Man Up in 2007. After the ladder war, a crazy ladder war, and yes, I would run a crazy blood feud after a crazy blood feud, back to back with the Briscoes. I would do that. You have that big angle, and Jay Briscoe was hung from the ceiling. You got Necro running around with a barbed wire fist. You have Jacobs getting blood dripped on. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. And an insane start needs a pretty insane finish. Unfortunately, we never quite got that. Yeah, we got a bunch of street fights and whatnot. Hell, there was even that wacky steel cage warfare that happened at Glory by Honor in 2008. Very wacky. Like, weird. It was the one where Necro had already left Age of the Fall, but they were putting him in steel cage warfare as a 7th man, and he would have to choose sides, and there was a whole bunch of stuff. But this would just be straight up Briscoes versus the Age of the Fall, and by Age of the Fall I mean Jimmy Jacobs, Tyler Black, and the Necro Butcher, and I guess Lacey too, because she's pretty important. I wanted War of the Wire 3 here. For those who don't know, War of the Wire is just a no-rope barbed wire match. It happened twice before in ROH. First with Homicide and Steve Corino, and next with BJ Whitmer and Necro Butcher. And here I wanted to see, I thought that's what this feud was going to build towards. Since Necro had already introduced barbed wire into the feud, and there was plenty of blood to go around. So it just sort of seemed natural that it would get that escalated. Sure, they'd already gone all over the place with the Briscoes and Steen and Generico, but when you start off that hot, there's no sense in not trying it again. I mean, just have your street fights went up, but you gotta build to something bigger than some really weird stuff. And first of all, why would you turn Necro face? Especially within a year of the angle starting. Nonsense. I'd have, Age of the Fall have that. I would have had Age of the Fall win the tag titles from him at Final Battle 07. That was the right choice. But in the long run, the idea is, Steve and Generico are going to get the belts. That's the deal. So you got to give the Briscoes and Age of the Fall something big to climax with, aside from just, a title rematch. And that's War of the Wire. And yes, it sounds absolutely insane. I mentioned this idea once to Nightmare Ball of One, another wrestling YouTuber, comic book YouTuber, what have you. You know who he is. If you're watching my channel, you know who he is. Go subscribe to him, even though you already are. I mentioned this to him, and his reaction is exactly what every ROH fan would have had the reaction. Oh my god, that's insane. And yes, it is insane. The Briscoe brothers, just the craziest rednecks. They really are. Like, real life, wrestling life, what have you. The craziest rednecks. Jimmy Jacobs, glutton for punishment. Tyler Black, willing to get hardcore. And Necro, he punches people in the face. Basically for real in a fake sport. He also lands on his face a lot. I think he's up for the task of, landing in some barbed wire. And yeah, I would do some spots with Lacey too. And, the Briscoes would probably go over in this case. Just to end it. And then, not until you blow that off with the Briscoes should you have gone on to breaking apart Age of the Fall and whatnot. That's, that was something that was really missed out on. And was basically a dream match that happened yet didn't. So there's that. Up next, best in the world versus worst in the world. In 2009 and 2010, one Bryan Danielson started making his way to Chikara for a couple visits. Starting with King of Trios 2009, a spot in the fall, after a spot in the fall before he was going to, stupid phone, head to the WWE, and came back the summer afterwards for a couple shots while he was on his indie run pre-WWE, whatever you want to call it, summer of 2010. And in about that time, Icarus of Fist in Chikara had garnered the gimmick of worst in the world, at least as seen by the fans. That's just a natural thing that these two should have faced off. When they brought Danielson in for the 2010 double shot, they had him face Eddie Kingston and Tim Donst. The Kingston match I think I'm fine with, because they were building Eddie a lot that year. They were having him beat everyone that they could get their hands on. And although they didn't beat him, they did have Danielson win, not clean. They wanted to put Eddie in there with everyone, and I think that's true. The Donst thing, well, the match is really good between Donst and Danielson, and Donst was getting big at the time. The Young Lions Cup reign that he had going on in 2010 as part of the BDK, big deal. But either replace Donst with Icarus, or try to get him in for another shot, or hell, could have gotten him in the summer before, because Icarus had basically had that moniker at that point as well. And just do it. Just do the match. Do it for the fans. You know, do it in a good Chikara area, and it would be out of this world. And, you know, it's just fun. It's just fun when you get that dynamic going. Like, it's best in the world versus worst in the world. That's hilarious. Yeah, so that's pretty simple. Bryan Danielson versus Icarus. Should have happened. Probably will never happen, but we can always hope. Steel Cage Warfare. This was another 2010 one, and this is another ROH one. And this one was an idea I came up with. Well, there were combinations of stuff happening. This one never happened. I'm a big War Games fan, War Game style matches, and using that on super indies, like ROH basically is, when you get the real top talent all in one cage, that's really cool. And around this time, you also had two really big feuds going on. You had Kings of Wrestling versus the Briscoes, and Kevin C and Steve Corino versus El Generico and Colt Cabana. While you're building up those things, I think an intermediary should have been War Games. Steel Cage Warfare, for what ROH calls it. Basically, put Briscoes with Generico and Cabana, put Kings of Wrestling with Steen and Corino, and just have a big old War Games match. Again, this is more so a match of kind of got my hopes up in my own head, at least, that this could happen. And, you know, these guys face each other a whole bunch. I mean, I'm pretty sure every team faced each other at some point, but they never had a big 8-man tag of any sort, and definitely didn't have one in a steel cage under War Games rules. But hey, a sucker can dream. As you can tell, most of these are actually more modern. I didn't become a fan until 2003. That's just what I think. And you know, a lot of them are indie centric. Again, it's what I know, and honestly, it's where I think some of the more creative stuff has yet to happen. At least in my eyes, I think there's a lot more creative juices that flow from all the talent that goes through independent wrestling, as to who can match up and when. I mean, you get bizarre dynamics like Bryan Danielson versus Icarus just happening, and again, the flow of talent, just that many more combinations. WWE and TNA, you just got a bunch of guys contracted. They eventually run into each other at some point, and even if they don't, it's not like they really any fan really wanted to have them meet up in the first place. Or at least I don't think. Not many that I can remember. But I'll get to that. Up next, the Bad Boy Goes Rogue. This one is a TNA one that could have taken place around 2005. At this point, they were starting out on Fox Sports Net with Impact. They had started the year before, in 2004, and they were building up and starting to get their name out there. Hard Justice 2005, in May 2005, back then Hard Justice was in May, was coming out. Big pay-per-view. Jeff Jarrett versus AJ Styles for the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. Yes, the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship was still in TNA at this point. They brought in a special enforcer. One Huntington Beach bad boy, Tito Ortiz. I think this could have been a perfect cue, even with Ortiz's MMA career going on at the same time, to have him be a huge crossover. You know, TNA was eventually going to make their way to Spike TV in the fall, for Impact in October of 2005. And Tito Ortiz was going to be a special enforcer once again at Bound for Glory in October of 2005. By then, Ultimate Fighter had already started up, and around this time, they were already getting the plans ready for the Shamrock and Ortiz season, which is a hell of a season because it's Shamrock and Ortiz duking it out. verbally. The fights, not so much. This would have been a hell of a time to do a huge crossover with Ortiz. And basically have him shoot in TNA. This is kind of where I want to bring some Inokiism to America. Inokiism is a term that comes from the way Antonio Inoki, the founder of New Japan Pro Wrestling and longtime owner until the past decade or so, in the sort of early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, he started booking a lot of shoot fighters in his pro wrestling world, as well as sending his pro wrestlers out into the shoot fighting world. You could say this idea kind of got started from the whole UWFI New Japan feud of the 80s and 90s. I can never remember when and where those two promotions feuded for the life of me. But then again, people knew that to an extent that UWFI was worked, and people in Japan know that pro wrestling is worked and MMA is not, for the most part. We can debate that all day. And he would bring in shoot fighters to do pro wrestling, and a lot of the matches would try to blur the lines between what was worked and what was shoot. Probably most famously being Naoya Ogawa, famous judoka in Japan around 1999 2000. Actually, I think he might have been in as early as 97. But around 99 2000, they started doing a huge feud with Naoya Ogawa and one of New Japan's top star, arguably the top star, aside from Inoki, Shinya Hashimoto. A pro wrestler. Never much of a shoot guy. I don't think he ever did much shoot at all. Shoot fighting at all, which can't be said for some of today's New Japan top guys, your Yuji Nagatas, your Shinsuke Nakamura's and whatnot. And basically, you have, sorry, my nose is very stuffy. Whew. Okay, let's try and get this one take. And those matches basically were trying to blur the lines between work and shoot, and were for the most part aimed at putting over pro wrestling. And I want to kind of do that. I wish they could have done that here. Have Tito Ortiz basically just say, screw it, I'm a fighter and I'm going to fight here. I'm not going to be a special attraction. This is a new place for me to dominate. You bring me in, I'm going to do that. Only what, and Tito Ortiz at this time was hot. He was red hot at the time. The Shamrock stuff was going to be coming up, and we know he's got charisma. He's basically a pro wrestler in an MMA fighter's body, and he works the fans all the time. And to have him come in and basically start calling out, and you would shoot him right to some of the top guys. This one is less of a dream match and more of a dream angle. You basically want to put him up against your, and not too many heels you would actually put him up against. It would be mostly baby faces. You would want to kind of conflict people on, because if they put him up against a heel, they would have just cheered for him because he's Tito Ortiz and he's cool. If you put him up against a face, Ortiz is still cool, but people really like this baby face. If they had put him up against AJ Styles, that would have been bizarre, to say the least, because you would have him shoot, basically. Work his shoot, but you basically have him do his MMA moveset. And, there would be lots of punches and takedowns and very few high spots. There'd be, I guess you could throw in some slams. Think what Lesnar kind of did at Extreme Rules with John Cena. He did some of his MMA moveset, but he also threw in clotheslines, which are very pro wrestling, and some big slams, which are very much more pro wrestling and very rare in MMA, although not impossible. You basically have him do that with some of the top guys. And probably at the top of the list would be him versus AJ Styles. Although you could also run him with Monty Brown. Probably you wouldn't want to have Monty Brown full on heel at this point. You would want him to be just the alpha male that everyone appreciates. And that, boy, would that be a charisma clash to end all charisma clashes. And you got a football player versus an MMA fighter. They're just gonna, even if they can't do anything technically amazing, you know, they're just gonna rough each other up. God, I can't talk. But yeah, it's just, again, it's less of a dream match, but more of, you got, why not experiment with that? You got Tito Ortiz, you got him, you got Spike TV backing you and the UFC at the same time. Tito's going to re-sign with them. Or even before he resigns with the UFC, they could have gotten him. And save him for pay-per-view. Absolutely. Save him for pay-per-view. Unless he's squashing a no-name guy, and I mean a no-name guy. Like, not even like, he wouldn't even face Shark Boy on TV. He could have faced freaking Eric Young, and that would be a pay-per-view match. Because he'd be up against a pro wrestler. Unless you put him up against a no-name jobber in under 90 seconds, where the jobber gets zero offense, he would only appear on pay-per-view, and those jobbers on the occasional TV, which you build up to. So, again, less of a dream match, more of an angle. Because Inokiism interests me. What happens when you just sort of cross worlds over, fake and real, basically, and how do people perceive it? How would people have perceived Tito Ortiz challenging AJ Styles for the World Heavyweight Championship? How would people perceive that? An MMA fighter in pro wrestling. And doing that in 2005 would have been incredibly timely. That would have been unbelievable with the UFC just starting to get huge. And it's more interesting than bring in, say, Shamrock, because Shamrock did pro wrestling. You've already done that. Ortiz, he hasn't done it. It's fresh. And again, what's going to happen? I rambled on far too long on that one. Let's move on. The ever-raising eyebrow and the ever-receding hairline. It's Shawn Michaels versus The Rock. Why this couldn't happen in 2003, 2004? Shame. Shame, shame, shame. Yeah. God. Sorry. Zone out for a second, just thinking about it. The match would be the match. But you could do a hell of an angle around it. I would think to put it basically a charisma fight. But more than just that. Like, we know that Shawn Michaels was the sexy boy, and The Rock was the fucking Rock. Just two charismatic guys who, face or heel, pretty much had the crowd in the palm of their hand. But I want to go further than that. I want to talk about sort of the humility behind the charisma. Because when you run this match in, say, 2003 or 2004, whichever stint Rock had, that early 2003 stint or that early 2004 stint, where he wrestled at both those manias, 19 and 20. At this point, Shawn Michaels has had a big run in the 90s. He had an injury or something for 4 years. He's found God. He's given up the pills. And he's older. He's just getting old. And he's not really the sexy boy. Even if he's still sexy, he'd just be a man. Maybe a guy, but a man. And I basically want The Rock to point this out. I want him to be like, you know, I'm not going to do a Rock impression. Basically just be like, hey, you know, you ain't the sexy boy anymore, you know, and talk about his hairline. I mean, just talk, you know, how women see him now. You know, you had, you know, Grandpa Sean, just make fun of his age, make fun of his looks, make fun of all that stuff. Basically going towards charisma. And Sean basically responds with that he's human, and you know, and he sees that now. And The Rock, and he's saying, you know, how The Rock hasn't learned this in 7, 8 years of being in the company. You know, he doesn't realize that his bravado isn't going to last forever, at least on the inside. He can always appear pompous and whatnot, but when you're Sean's age, you start to put things in perspective and see how you really are, even if you put on a show for the people. And basically have Sean say, Rock, do you know who you really are? Or, you know, are you becoming the gimmick? You know, do you really kick Rudy Poo candy asses all the time and take people to the SmackDown hotel, possibly for sex? I don't know what happens there. The SmackDown hotel just sounds dirty. Hell, even have him make a joke like that. Have Sean make some jokes too. Have him make fun of Rock's humor, his use of humor, defense mechanisms, bring up all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of an examination that almost exposes the business, I guess, sort of, but just sort of like, you know, it gives you an idea of how much these guys have to put in to being a character. And it ends with a match where it's a bit grittier than you expect, because they're trying to fight from within, as opposed to, I'm going to do my big bitch slap, or I'm tuning up the band and playing to the crowd and whatnot. The idea is that at the end of the day, it's about them fighting to succeed. It's kind of complicated to put it, and it's hard to explain without spending a shitload more time, because this video is already running long. But you get the idea. Kind of go into, yeah, all that stuff. Moving on. Desperate Measures Part 1. This is a Chikara one. Have I already done? Yeah, I've already done Chikara one. But this is another Chikara one. This is Part 1. 2010. The BDK have dominated. They've won King of Trios. They've won the Campeones de Parejas. The majority of the year, they have the Young Lions Cup. They were winning everything. And they were tearing apart the promotion. There was a blog. I actually made a video excitedly reacting to this blog on my channel. Mike Quackenbush and Jigsaw were trying really hard to get the 3 points to challenge Claudio Castagnoli and Aries for the Tag Team Championships. They were, unfortunately, the target of many cheap BDK tactics, mainly in referee Derek Zavato, the heel ref of the BDK, screwing them over anytime they got close. And with the director of fun in the BDK's back pocket, you could believe, just, they got 2 points, get Zavato out there. So it seemed like it was impossible for Quackenbush and Jigsaw to get the match. Briefly before they actually did earn 3 points in a very innovative way of having them get it all in one match, that Zavato happened to not be reffing, although there was a BDK duo in the match. I believe it was Del Rey and Hayes. who were in the match, trying to stop them. Before that, they made a tease. Stigma, the former Shane Storm, wrote a blog informing us that he and Mike Quackenbush had 3 points. That's true. Back in 2008, they had garnered 3 points, winning 3 consecutive tag matches, required to challenge for the Campeones de Parejas. Those were never cashed in, as the moment that they scored the 3rd point, it was discovered that Shane Storm had betrayed Mike Quackenbush, revealing the Chikara special. Blah, 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 they have a feud. They're obviously not buddies. They're not going to cash in those 3 points ever. And as desperation grows, Stigma does point this out, that yes, there is a Chikara duo who has 3 points. Me and Mike. And they don't do it. They never do the match. Quackenbush and Jigsaw get the 3 points and win the titles. A really, really good match. A really great moment. But there was something there for doing Quackenbush and Stigma to get this desperate, to have them be the ones to have to challenge the BDK. And honestly, they could have lost, but I think they should have at least done it. Again, another case of you got our hopes up, but you never went through with it. And this is a promotion I love. It never got done, and I'm very upset at that. Which brings us on to Desperate Measures Part 2. Same BDK angle, same company, Chikara. I had an idea early in the BDK thing where the BDK is becoming a dominant faction. But they're not the first dominant faction. They're not the first dominant faction in Chikara to have Claudio Castagnoli as one of its leaders. That'd be the Kings of Wrestling. Around the fall of 2010, Larry Sweeney was able to make a one-time return for Chikara for the Cibernetico match. Which got me thinking, my God, I have the Trios match in my head right now. You have the 2010 King of Trios, Claudio, Aries, and Tursus. You could just go with them, because they were the King of Trios. And Larry goes up to Mike, Quackenbush, that is, and says, Mike, you know who we have to get to stop these guys. And Mike, utterly furious. He knows what Larry is talking about. And he will not. He is fervently against this. It's Chris Hero, the leader of the Kings of Wrestling, former partner of Larry Sweeney in the Kings of Wrestling. Larry, a trainee of Mike Quackenbush, Chris Hero, former tag partner of Mike Quackenbush, before turning on him, starting up the aforementioned Kings of Wrestling, and former co-trainer of the Chikara Wrestle Factory. Basically, imagine if the NWO was so big that you had to put Sting with the Four Horsemen. Mike Quackenbush has to team with Larry Sweeney and Chris Hero to beat these guys, to beat the BDK. That's an insane idea, but insane enough to work, to possibly beat these guys. This dominant force. To beat a dominant force, you need to look at your history and see who else is truly dominant. Mike Quackenbush teams with two of the figureheads of the Kings of Wrestling in a hell freezes over tight moment to face off with the BDK. I just think that would have been insane. Would Hero have gone back to Chikara? He was never in Chikara after 2007. A very bizarre story that I've never fully understood. I'll ask Ramble Flosion. He might remember something. But why that never happened, I don't know. Or Nightmare, maybe someone knows. But yeah, that's Desperate Measures Part 2 on an idea that could have played into the Chikara BTK feud. Oh my god, this 34 minutes, Jesus Christ. 3 more. Up next is another TNA one, when Joe met Scotty. In 2005 and 2006, there was this guy, Samoa Joe. He was starting to get pretty big. He was in the same company as one of my heartwarming favorites, if you will, Raven. Scotty's Scott Levy is Raven, but the shoot name, whatever. Raven versus Samoa Joe. I don't know why I wanted to see that match so much. It may have actually happened, but never got built to. And I think it would have been just so bizarre. Maybe not MMA fighter and pro wrestling bizarre, but bizarre just characters. You have Mr. Legit tough man ass kicker Samoa Joe, and then you have slightly aging, still punk rock, emo, grungy Raven. I think that Styles Clash would have been just, yeah, this pretty much would have only played to my wants and needs. It would have been bizarre, but I would have loved it because I love both these guys. Moving on. Domestic Disturbance. I'm not proud of that joke. Why TNA never did Kurt Angle versus Awesome Kong? Again, I'm not proud of that joke. Why they never did that? Bizarre. I mean, it was around that time that 2008, he was kind of just overly involved with the world title at this point, and I'm just like, why? Just let him do what he wants to do. He wants to do programs with Jay Lethal. He wanted to do a program with Awesome Kong. And I think that just would have been bizarre. And depending on what point in the history you do it, you can basically bring up Kurt Angle's history with women. Just go ahead and say it. Say it. Just say, this guy has trouble with his lady friends. And now he is facing an ass-kicking woman to end all ass-kicking women. And boy, would that have been something. People would have been so intrigued to see what's going to happen when a guy who has a legitimate history of women's trouble gets put in there with a really tough woman. And plus the match would have been, again, bizarre, but really fun. Yeah. Kurt Angle versus Awesome Kong. Should happen. I guess it could still happen should Angle ever go back to WWE, even though he's been saying that he might go back for 3-4 years now. Whatever. But yeah, again, not proud of that title joke at all. But it's funny. Alright. And lastly, this is a WWE one. My only other WWE one. And I think it could have been something very cool. A prickly situation. Prickly as in one, Cactus Jack, Mick Foley. Around late 2006, 2007, the WWE had... Yes, I'm doing editing on my little notepad here. Fuck. The WWE had a champion that got a mixed reaction, to say the least. That was one John Cena. You may have heard of him. Maybe. He's kind of obscure. Yeah. And as of the past year or so, people have started bringing up on screen how John Cena is never fazed by the fans. And they always bring weird people to do that, and like Kane, the weirdest of them all. I think the right guy to do this and to do this in late 06, early 07, maybe a Mania thing. I don't know. Just putting that out there. Is to have Mick Foley point this out. And I chose Mick Foley, and I would like to have seen Mick Foley do this. First of all, this thing would have been a cool match, Cena versus Foley, where Foley wasn't terribly out of shape, and Cena was starting to pick his game up a bit around late 06, early 07. God, I'm stuffed up. So, Foley's the one to point this out. And I think it's cool that Foley does it, because this is the man who fell off a cage for love. This is the guy who literally did everything for the fans. And fortunately, for the most part, got cheered. Although I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, I think there might have been Undertaker chants when he got thrown off the cell. Maybe it was just a heat of the match thing. Maybe the fans were just trying to keep kayfabe. I don't know. But I think it's cool for Mick Foley to bring this up to John Cena. And John to kind of fire back with, to basically go out and say, I'm going to be myself, and myself doesn't mean I die for these fans. He's not saying it as a heel. He's just kind of putting that out there, that he does what he does, and he does have fans, and anyone else who hates him just sort of hates him, and it doesn't faze him. But then it's Foley the one I want to get really intense. Almost a heel. Almost. He needs to dig into Cena. I mean, he needs to just, he needs to point out, stop trying to be this good guy champion when, how can you be a good guy champion when half the crowd hates you? Like, how can you do this? And, and how Foley earned the fans' respect and went to insane lengths to do that. And for Cena not to do that is, that's Cena being selfish to protect himself. Again, I'm just kind of shooting from the hip on what this would be. You would bring up a lot of different aspects of, how would the Cena character and the Foley character exist together, and what would they think of each other? And this is basically what motivates me to want to see it. Had it happened around 06, 07. Again, Foley not in the worst shape, and Cena picking up his game a bit around this time as champion, because he was about to start like a year-long reign where you could see him changing into a better worker, I guess, something like that. He was getting closer to the guy who he is today. Again, when you're working with Shawn Michaels a whole bunch. That doesn't hurt. God, I'm tired. Sorry, folks. And I think it's cool for Foley to be the one to bring this up. You can't just have any old heel bring it up. And I loved his segment with Piper, just because Piper's a natural promo. But I think a real interesting thing is to have them have a match. And 2011 Piper isn't going to have a match with John Cena. Late 2006, early 2007 Mick Foley, he can have a match with John Cena. He can do that. And the Foley character, I think, is perfect for trying to poke holes in Cena's, resilience over the fans, and to have him basically question, how much do you really care about these people if you're okay with half of them hating you? You're about as you're being about as friendly as Triple fucking H. Well, I think at this time he was a face, but whatever. To have these people, you're Eric Bischoff, and to the other half, you're God. That's a terrible thing when all you're doing is being your generic good guy. And talk about character and whatnot and everything. It's again a complicated thing. I didn't have much time to flesh this whole idea out, but like the Rock Shawn Michaels thing, with WWE again, you kind of got to dig a little deeper to get a dream match there. On the indie circuit, at least for me personally, it's more of and even TNA, it's more of a matching up the talent just because it would be something crazy or a storyline would have called for it at any given time. But in WWE, I had to dig a little deeper, even though there's an obvious one with Rock and Shawn Michaels, but I wanted to kind of add another element to that. And Foley Cena, I don't think that ever happened. There was Foley's late 07 run where he had a bunch of stuff going on, and he was on Raw a bunch and having a bunch of matches. But I don't think he ever ran into Cena at any point, at least one-on-one. So yeah, there's that. I'm gonna end this video because it's gone really fucking long. Like Mickey Babylon would tell me to cut it down. Oh, Mickey, glad you're back. So yeah, there's my dream matches and my best explanations I could on what I wanted to see, more than that I would ever want to see in the future going on. Hindsight is 2020, and I would much prefer to have 2020 vision of the past than hazy vision of a future, especially in wrestling, where it doesn't really matter what you think. Oh, how macabre is that? Oh god, I need to fucking shut this camera off. Alright. Stay classy, everybody. Fuck. I'll see you guys at some point.